Hi, this is Kevin. Welcome to part one of my tutorial for the migrations assignment. And in the migrations assignment, we're going to be loading some test data that we're not going to be using in the current week. We're going to be using it next week when we get to pagination. Okay, but when we get there, you'll be glad that we have the data, and you'll also be glad that you know more about migrations. So let's first of all let's take a look at the data that we have in the system so far. So I'm going to run the manage.py task, and I'm going to run server to get the development server up, and I'm going to click on my link, and things are going to open up. So down the road, the next thing we're going to learn how to create paginated pages. Okay, and we're going to do it for instructors and students. So if we look at how many instructors we have so far, we've got 2, 4, 6, 7. Okay, well, that's well, you know, that might be all the instructors that we have. But of course, if you do this for an entire university or even an entire department, uh, not all of the instructors would fit on a reasonable size page. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to generate enough instructors and load them into the database such that it will make sense to use pagination features. So we can look at page 1 of the instructors, page 2, page 3. And we'll probably put, I forget how many I put on the page, 20, 25, something like that. So we just don't have the data to do that now. And if we look for students, we've got the same thing. We've got 2, 4, 6 students. Normally, I would have up to 35 students in a single class, right? So, and I don't want to type them all in. So what we want to do is we want to create data loading scripts for instructors and for students. And in each of them, we're going to add 125 new individuals. So when we do that, if we start out with 6 students, we'll go from 6 rows in the table to up to 131. And with the instructors, if we started out with 7, we'd go from 7 up to 132. And that's just a number that I knew would give us a lot of pages, and we could kind of practice with the pages. So this is not the week for pagination. This is the week for migrations, but we're going to load the data that we're going to use when we get to pagination. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, one easy way to load test data is to do it with the migrations feature. So let's go. I'm going to turn off the development server, and let's go see what we've done so far with migration. So up in my course info app, I have a migrations directory, and you can see that I had an initial migration, and that began with the number 0001. Then there was another one, and then there was a third one, and the third one has 0003 as the number. And perhaps you've been paying attention, or maybe you haven't, but these are generated every time we run the command, the manage.py command, make migrations. Okay, so that's how we got these three. And when we use the command migrate, we run the migration scripts. So we've got three here that are already run. Now, how do I know they're already run? Well, if I come down here to the manage.py window, I can type in show migrations, and I'm going to use autocomplete to get that in there, and then enter again. And let's just make this window big. So you see all the migrations that have run so far, and they're organized by app. Okay. And the ones that we're interested in are the ones for course info. So you can see number one, initial has run. Number two has an auto-generated name. It has run. And number three, also with an auto-generated name, has run as well. Okay. So it turns out, and we can also see that there's a whole bunch of migrations for the auth application. There's applications for the admin application. So there are a whole bunch of these that have already run. Okay. And now, one aspect of, so what do migrations do? Well, the kind of migrations that have already run are kind of schema migrations. They take changes that we've made in models.py, right? And they go and they send commands to the database server to reflect those changes in the model inside of Django, have those same changes executed as it changes to the schema in the external relational database. Okay, so let's go look and see what they kind of look like. Okay, let's look at the last one that I ran, this 003. It's a plain old Python program. I'm able to double click on it and open it. And it's kind of interesting. It's a class, okay? It's called Migrations. Its subclass is the migration class in the migrations package that's part of Django. And inside of it, it's got two parts. It's got dependencies and operations. Okay? So, what are the dependencies? Well, in the dependencies, we point out the prior script that has to be run before this one can run. And as you can see, it points to 002. It says it's in the app course info, and it's at 0002 auto blah blah blah. This one up here. Okay, so this essentially says you can't run this until you've already run 2. And if we peek at 2, it's going to say you can't run that until you've already run 1. And if we peek at 1, it's going to say it doesn't have any dependencies. So that's what the dependencies do. Okay? All right. Let's go back and look at 3. All right. So the operations are the things that we're going to do in the migration, okay? And these are all built-in operations that have to do with making changes in the schema out in the external relational database. So here we're going to alter model options on instructor, and we're going to change the ordering. Okay. And looks like we did that for a whole bunch of things all at once. I guess we changed the ordering, and we had unique constraints and all of that kind of stuff. That's when we added all of that. So this is what happens is when we run one of these migration scripts. This is how the Django infrastructure is able to generate the transactions that go out and change the external relational database. Okay, these program parts generate that. Okay, so that was number 3. Let's look at number 2. Okay, so we had alter model options. So we had added an ordering to course, and then we added a constraint to course. This was a unique together constraint. So that's how we got those. And let's look at 0001 initial. And here's where we initially defined the database. So this is where we created the course table, the instructor, the period, the student, the year, the semester, the section, the registration. Okay? All right. So how do these get created? They get created by make migrations. Okay? And how do they get run? Well, they get run with migrate. Okay? And it just so happens that migrations can run forward or backward. Okay? Typically, when we're doing this kind of migration that we're doing so far that are related to the schema of the database, running them backwards doesn't have a lot of meaning. You know, we change the external database, and then we want to unchange the external database. Well, I can see some use cases for it, but that's only if we had made some pretty big mistakes. Okay, so generally speaking, these schema migrations, we make them. We do a make migrations every time we make a change in models.py, and then we run the migrations with a migrate, and it changes the external database to match our models.py code, and we're completely happy. Okay, that's a schema migration. Those are the kinds of things that we've been doing. There's other kinds of migrations, and the ones that we're going to learn about today are data migrations. We can use those to load data into the database. How does that help? Well, there are times that for testing, we just need extra data into the database. Like we've got plans, to add 125 instructors and to add 125 students. Okay, so that's good, right? Because we can test the pagination. But you can imagine us wanting to test a lot of things in our application that need, some real data in order to work. Okay. Why is it good to do this with the data migration instead of trying to do it with the app or with the admin app? Well, it's a lot less typing, right? So that sounds good. Okay, the other things is you're able to run them in reverse. You're able to back them out. So for instance, let's say we're getting ready to use our system. We want to make sure that the pagination works for instructors and students. So we add 125 instructors and we add 125 students. But now we want to go into production. Do we really want to have to recreate the database from scratch again? Or wouldn't it be nice to be able just, to back out the migration that added the instructors and back out the migration that added the students, and then we'd be back to the real data that we have? Okay? I'm not saying you're always going to want to do this, but it's a good thing to have. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. The thing we're going to do here in part one is we're going to build a script to do a migration to load the instructor data. And then when we get to part two, we'll do the same thing for student. Okay? Alrighty. So, the next thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at the downloads for this part of the assignment. Okay, and I've taken the starter files and I have expanded them. And let's just take a look at what we have here. We've got a Python file that is called 0004 load instructor test data, and this is a copy of the migration, the data migration for the instructor data. It's just copied out of my code. Are we just going to copy it in? No, we're not going to exactly do that because we need to make sure that we get things to match up. But that's where that's going to come. Okay. The next thing that we have is we've got this student names Python code. So let's look at each of these. So I'm going to back up. Here's the program for load instructor test data.py. And I'm going to open it with Sublime Text. That's my favorite editor right now. And it's got a lot of things in it, okay, but so it's the entire migration script, okay, including the data for instructors, okay, and we're going to take this code and we're going to paste it over top of some code. So that's what that is. Let's get that one off of there. The thing with the student names, we're going to build the student one by cloning the code I've given you for the instructor one. We're going to do that in part two. And so I've given you the names code. So if you open this, I'm going to open this one with Sublime Text as well. And that opened on another page. Okay. But I have all the student names here too, and they're already formatted to go into the script. Okay. You might say, gee, that's great. And so, how do you get that? Well, I have a program. I have a PyCharm project that's called EZU Test Data Helpers. And we're going to open that. Okay, so let me go up here and say that I want to open this. Okay, and I'm going to open up yet another copy of PyCharm. And I'm going to go to downloads, and you can see in here I've got this EZU Test Data Helpers. So I'm going to open up that and open it up in a new window. And that opened up over there. And I included this because when you're going to generate test data for your own final project, you might want to load data using this kind of scheme, right? And then you might want to process the data to turn it into the right kind of code to include into one of these migration scripts, okay? And so what I've got here is I've got two files that have the original names. So if you open this, these were the names for the instructors. And I generated these off a web page that I found through Google. Now the names are all kind of Anglo-Saxon. And I tried to find a list that was more diverse. I was looking for a tool that would be able to generate a list of names that you would typically find in the U.S., including Hispanic names and those kinds of things. And then I wanted to generate some from China because we get a lot of international students from China, and I wanted to generate some from India because we get a lot of international students from India. And I spent a couple hours on that today, and that turned out to be not as promising as I thought. So even though I wanted a better list of names, it was kind of more representative of kind of the diverse mix of people that we have here at the iSchool. That was going to take me a lot more hours of work to get done. And I decided that for this teaching of the course, I'd have to go with my sort of Northern European names, mostly, I think, from England. Okay? So, in the project here, I have files that contain the names, and then I've got programs that read that file, okay, and turn out a file of Python code, okay, and it's in the format that is just well suited to the kind of scripts that we write for data migrations, okay? So you don't have to do anything with this project at all, but I just wanted to show you my approach to generating the data and getting in a friendly format where you can include that code in a data migration. And I thought that if you're going to do something like that for your project, this code that I've included here in a PyCharm project might help you get started. So I've just offered it to you. Okay. All right, so let's look at what we want to do. From the helper files, I have a copy of the migration script that's going to add all of the instructors, okay? And when I took it out of my project, it was called 0004 load instructor test data. Do I want to take this and simply copy it into my project? I'm not going to do that because maybe it's going to have the wrong number and it's not going to be properly connected to the migration that preceded it, okay? So here's what I want to do instead. I want to generate a shell of a migration program, and then I'm going to copy and paste the code from this program that came in the starter files. I'm going to copy and paste it into the newly generated script. So how do we generate a script? Well, we generate down in, we use manage.py. So we're down here in manage.py. .py, okay? And we want to generate another script. So here's how we can generate a script that is linked into the other ones, but is essentially empty of code. Okay, so we can type in make migrations, okay, and then space, and then the name of our app, course info, space, okay, and now we need to add two parameters, okay. We need dash dash and then the word empty. That's what says don't put any code into it, I'm going to fill it in myself, and then a space, and then we're going to have dash dash name space. Okay, so that says I want to give the file a particular name, okay, and then I'm going to use the name load instructor test data. So load underscore instructor underscore test underscore data. Now I'm gonna hit enter. Okay. Now this is the thing that happens all the time. I told it to generate a new migration script, okay, and I expected to see it pop up in a list of migrations as in 0004. It didn't. Okay. When you're expecting to see a file over here in your navigation panel, maybe the one that was just created, and you don't see it, here's what you can do. Go up to the name of your project and highlight it. Right click and say, choose reload from disk. And there's our new file. Okay? So this is a thing that happens, probably less than half of the time when you generate a new script the way I showed you to do it, will you actually see it in the list. Okay, why don't we double click it and look at it. Okay, well, it has the basic parts, all right? You can see it was generated by Django 3.1.6. That's what I've got on my machine right now. Okay, we have an import of migrations from Django DB, and again, a migration, typically the class has the name migration, okay, and it subclasses the migration class from the migrations package, okay, and it's got two lists, dependencies and operations, okay. And you might ask yourself, well, how can it do any work if it's only got two lists? Well, it has a lot more code in the superclass. The code that does the processing is in the superclass, so we're inheriting it from the superclass, right? And the operations and the dependencies are the two list names that looks for. So we've already populated the dependencies, then we populate the operations, and then when we run the migration, the code that we've inherited from the superclass runs, okay, depending upon the configurations that we put into the two lists. All right, so let's go take a look at the code that we downloaded, okay, in the starter file. This one was called 0004 load instructor test data. And it's pretty much called the same thing, so I probably could have used it as is, but here's what I want you to do. We want to preserve the dependencies, right? And we want to add all this other code. So I don't want to change dependencies, but I'm going to copy operations, the whole list, okay? and I'm going to paste that over top of operations. Okay. All right. Now I've got two red squiggly lines because I'm referring to code that I haven't put into the file yet. Okay. Dependencies, this says, in order for this to run, 0003 auto blah 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 should have run. Well, we have an 0003 blah blah, so that's good. That's properly integrated. Okay. So now we want to take code that's going to be first of all, we have to find these two functions: add instructor data and remove instructor data. Okay. All right. Well, let's go find those. Again, I'm going to go look at my file from the starter files, add instructor data and remove instructor data. Let's copy those, and they go right on top of the migration class. So let's go there. Let's go on top of the migration class. Oh, I told that thing to minimize. So I'm going to click the plus again so we can see it all. And what I was trying to do is to get some extra blank lines. So I'm going to paste those right there. Okay. So the code that we're calling is not part of the migrations class. It's just in the module, but not in the migrations class. Okay, and you can see that the two names on line 42 and 43 are now not red underlined anymore, so we resolved them. Okay, but it turns out that both of these refer to a data name called instructors. Okay, and that's red underlining because we don't have that in yet. Okay, so let's go take a look at what that is. Okay, so we've got a big list here, and at the very top here, I'm looking at it on the other monitor, and you're not going to be able to see it. I'm sorry about that. So I go up to the top of the code that we downloaded, and you can see I've got a couple of imports, right? I've got generated by Django 3.1.6. That's good. So I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to start highlighting for my copy. I'm going to go all the way down through the last piece of data that's in instructors. Let's do that. It's going to take a while because we've got 3 lines for each instructor. Oh, there it is. So now I'm just going to change that such, oh boy, that didn't work. So now I have to highlight from here up, which is easier to do because I know where to stop. Okay. So I want all that. So let me copy that. All right. And we're going to go over to my code. And again, what am I going to do? Well, this was all above add instructor. So I'm just going to highlight that code that was above it, including the comment, and I'm going to paste over top of it. Okay. Now, what is this instructors? Well, we can see that it's a list. Okay, because it begins with a square bracket, and if we go all the way to the end, it ends with a square bracket, and the items are separated by commas. So the first item on the list is here, and those have curly braces, so those are dictionaries. Okay, so what we have is a list of dictionaries. Okay, and each dictionary in the list has got the data that we need to generate an instructor. Okay, and their key value pairs. So we're saying that the first name of the instructor, the value should be Leonard. The last name should be Buckland. The disambiguator should be the empty string. Okay, and then on to the next, and then on to the next. Okay, so this is the data that we're going to use to populate the table. Okay, that makes sense. And we're representing the data. Each row of the data is contained in a dictionary. Okay, and the dictionaries are all in a list. Okay, so if we're adding 125 of them, I think that we're going to find that there are 125 items on the list. Each one's a dictionary. Okay, so it's a list of dictionaries with our test data. Why is instructors capitalized? Instructors is capitalized because we want to signal to the reader of the program that we're going to treat instructors as a constant. Even though it's big and even though it's a lot of data, we have no intention to change it. It's read-only data, okay? And one way to signal that is to put it into a variable, give that variable a name with all caps, and that's going to signal that we're going to treat it as a constant. Does Python truly have constants? No, in a mechanical sense, it doesn't. There's nothing to keep you from from changing the values inside of that are being pointed to by the variable that has a name that is in all caps. But it's a way to signal your intent to not be changing that data. Okay? So let's look at what else is going on here. Let's go down to the bottom of the code, okay, and look at this. So the dependencies, these are going to be used to make sure, okay, that if we're going to run 004, this is going to check that 3 has already run. Okay, 3 is going to check that 2 has already run. 2 is going to check that 1 has already run. Okay, so this is a way to make sure that things are run in the right order. And then the operation 02, add instructor data, remove instructor at data. Why do we need them both? Remember that I told you that migrations need to be able to run forward and backward. Okay, so we need to be able to add the instructor data when we're running them forward, and when we're backing out the migration, we need to be able to remove the instructor data. And that's what we've got. Now, I just want to point out here that these two names of functions, okay, these are not function calls per se. Why aren't they? Well, they're not function calls because they don't have paren on the end. So all we're doing is we're giving Run Python the names of the functions that it will call when the time comes. And when it calls them, it will use a set of parens. Okay, but all we're doing is configuring Run Python. Okay, and we're saying here's the name of the function to run when you're running forward, and here's the name of the function to run when you're running backward. Okay, so let's look at add instructor data. Add instructor data, it gets passed two kind of standard parts that come from the come from the migration infrastructure. Apps is going to be a list of apps in in the Django environment. Schema editor is an object that helps us with schema migrations. Since this is a data migration, we're not going to refer to it. It gets passed to us though, so we have to have it on the list. Okay, so how do we use apps? Well, we need to get a reference to the instructor class from the apps. So from the apps object, we call get model the name of the app and then the name of the model class, and that gets us a reference to the model class from our app. Okay. So now we can say for instructor and instructors, okay, that's the test data up here, okay. That's in our list, okay. So instructor is one element on the list. You'll remember that that's a dictionary, right? Okay, so we're going through that one by one, okay. Each of those is going to represent a row that we want to add to the table, okay? And we want to do a try except, okay? One thing that we're concerned about when we're loading test data is we don't want to accidentally try to load a test row over a production row, over a real row, okay? It's possible that our test names could be the same as some of the names we have in there already. So what we do is that we try to add this, we try to get an object with this first and last name, okay? And if it's out there, it is a duplicate. Oh, you know what we need to do? We need to have the disambiguator on that too. How about that? I'm going to have to change that in the code that I give to you. So we don't only want the first name and the last name. We want the first name and the last name in the disambiguator. Now it turns out that all of the disambiguators are empty. Okay. All right. I'm going to change that in the code that you download, so you won't have to fix that. Okay. In fact, let me just do that right now. I'm going to pause and make sure that's fixed when the time comes. Okay. I'll be right back. Okay. So what we do is that we try to find this exact row. Okay, and disambiguator should have no spaces around the equal. And I'll tell you why that is in a minute. Okay, so we use the instructor class, which we already got. We already got access to up on line 637 that you see here. And we call objects get, so we're trying to get an object that matches the first name, the last name, and the disambiguator. Now, why are these all jammed up? They are all jammed up because these three parameters are keyword parameters. And when you have a keyword parameter, see, there's the opening paren, there's the closing. These are three parameters separated by two commas, okay? When you have a keyword parameter, you type the name, and right after it equal, and right after that the value, okay? And so the value for first name is the instructor first name. For last name, it's the instructor last name. And the disambiguator is instructor disambiguator. And which instructor are we referring to here? Where we're referring to the one that we're on as we're going through the list. Okay, so we try to find it. If we succeed in finding it, we have a duplicate. So one of the rows that's already in the table matches one of our test data rows. We don't really want that to happen. That's a mistake. Okay. Okay. So we're expecting to not find the object. Okay. So if we don't find the object, it's going to throw an object does not exist exception, which we're going to catch. We're hoping that that's what is going to happen. We're going to catch that, and we're going to create a new object with our first name, our last name, our disambiguator. Okay? So this is kind of a backwards way to do it. We try to retrieve it, even though we're hoping it's not there. Okay? If we succeed in retrieving it, well, then we have to print that we have a duplicate, and we'll have to look at the output of the migration to make sure we don't get one of those kind of errors. Okay. And if it's as we hoped and we don't have an object there, then we're going to create one. And when you create it, implicitly it's been saved. You don't have to also save it. Okay? So we do this for every instructor in this list up here. Okay. And when we're done, we've added 125 of these. Okay, so that's what happens when you run this forward, when you do the migration. If you ask to back it out, it runs the other one. Okay, so this should do the opposite thing. Okay, it removes the instructor data. All right, so we do the same kind of thing. We have to get access to the model class. That's the same code. Okay, and then we have to iterate over that list of instructors that we have up here in the top of the code, right? So we have to do that for instructor and instructors. And we get the object. Okay. So all of the instructors that we added should be there. Okay. Which reminds me to warn you, if you want to be able to run this backwards later on to extract your test data out of your database, you can't have, in the meantime, deleted some of the instructors or later on the students that you added, because it's going to be looking for them. How does it know which ones to look for? It has kept the list. Okay, now it's using the list in order to take things out of the database. Okay, so for each of the ones on the list, it gets it. Okay, it wants to match exactly. It should match exactly if we haven't deleted it or edited it in any way. And then we just call delete on that object. So provided that you don't fool around with the test data and delete some or change some, well, then you ought to be able to run it backwards and forwards. So let's try to run it backwards and forwards. Before we do that, let's just take a look at the app again. Let's do a run server. Okay. And I can't get to my setting. It's going to be here. Come on. There it is. Almost there. Right there. There's my link. Okay. So again, instructors we've only got 7. All right. And then let's look also out on the database. Okay, so let's go to SQLite Studio. Okay, and then let's go to instructor. Okay, and then let's go to data, and then let's go to refresh. That's not good. Course info instructor. I still have my last batch of text. Oh, you know why? This is the wrong database. This was the database that I practice on. It's the EZU practice DB. So I have to add another one here. Database, add a database. And I have to go find this. And I don't want the practice one. I want the one that's in my EZU project. And it's DB SQLite 3, open. And I'm going to call this EZU database. It's not the practice one, it's the real one. Okay, so now I'm going to come over here and double click on that. Okay, and then I'm going to go down to the instructor table and double click on that. Now here we are. This is the one in the proper database. We're going to click on data, and there we are. Just 7 rows. Okay, now let's close this. Stop the production server. Okay, and let's run the migrations. So let's make this a little bit bigger so we know where we're working. Let's do show migrations. Okay, so we're interested in the list for course info, and you can see that the new one, migration 4, load instructor test data, has not been applied yet, but 3 has. So how do we apply 4? Well, the most explicit way to do it is to type in migrate space course info, the name of the app, space 4. Enter. Oh, sorry. I think I have to put 0004. I'm going to hit the up arrow to get that back. Back type over it, 0004. Enter. There it goes. Applying course info, and then it has a name. It starts with forward load instructor test data. Looks like it ran fine. If yours has not run fine, you have a program error. Okay? You just have to go back and find out what mistake you may have made. All right? All right, let's run server. Okay, let's look in the application. All right, let's go to instructors. And we have all these instructors now. So we have the original 7, plus we should have another 125. Okay, well, let's close that. That looks correct. Let's stop the server. Okay, and let's just go to SQLite Studio. And let's come up here. We're on the proper table. We're on course info instructor. We just need to hit this little refresh button here on the left side of the data window. And there we go. And how many do we have? We have 132. That's great. We can run it forward. All right. You're not done yet. Okay. Let's shrink that. Okay. And now let's look at, we're back here and manage a .py, run show migrations. Okay. And you can see for course info, it's all the way through 4. Okay. How could we get it to back off 4? Well, instead of telling it to back off 4, we tell it we want it to migrate to 3. So we can type in migrate course info 0003. Enter. And it says it's unapplying 4. And it looks like it ran fine. All right. So let's look at the app. Run server. Okay. And let's look at instructors. All those instructors we added are gone. We really back them out. Okay, it's really good capability for test data like this, where you really want to just kind of augment the things that you can type in by hand. Okay, so we can back it out. Let's just move this over. Oh, no, we have to stop the server to reapply it. So I'm going to stop my server, and then I'm going to do a show migrations. And 4 is not applied. So let's apply it. Migrate course info 0004. And it says that it applied it. And we run server. And we go to instructors. And we can see the data here. And it's all done. Okay. All right. So why don't we stop that? So this is the end of part 1. You've done the load instructor data. And I'm going to say bye for now, and I'll see you again in part 2. Bye-bye.